Hello, I'm Tom Palmer and I am a children's author, and this is a short assembly video about a project to do with Holocaust Memorial Day. But before I talk about that and these pictures to do with, as you can see, the moon landing, I just wanted to introduce myself briefly. So I've written quite a few football related books like these, and I also write history books, mostly First and Second World War. For instance, I've done a book called D-Day Dog. I've done a book called Arctic Star, and one of my books is called After the War, and that kind of relates to what we're talking about, because Holocaust Memorial Day, the 27th of January, and this year in 2023, focuses on stories to do with the Holocaust and the events during the Second World War between 1939 and 1945. And this book in particular is the story of a group of children who survived the Holocaust and came to live in this country in the UK as refugees. The story the things that I'm going to be talking to you about relate to that group of children as well, but they also relate to the moon landing. And before I talk about the actual projects and the work that we're going to be doing together, I wanted to show you something, which is here in this little bag. A friend of ours lent this to us. I just wanted to show you it because I think it's one of the most remarkable things I've ever held. And here it is. Right, it's quite hard to see, so I'm going to put it right up to the camera. But it's basically, this is a tie pin, and on the end you can see there's a white bit there. It kind of looks a bit like a tooth, doesn't it, there? But I'll just stop it jiggling about. That is a tiny piece of stone that's been inset into this tie pin, and that's not any ordinary piece of stone. That is a piece of moon rock, which for convoluted reasons belongs to a friend of ours, and they lent it so that I could show you it. But there you go. I'm holding a piece of moon rock. Anyway, and the reason I'm holding that piece of moon rock is because the project that we're doing to do with Holocaust Memorial Day this week, so that's from the 23rd to the 27th of January 2023, is to do with a Holocaust survivor, because we're marking Holocaust Memorial Day, who ended up being involved in the moon landings in 1969. So in 1945, after a horrendous several years of experience, Michael Novice, who's this guy here, came to the UK as a refugee. He had survived the Holocaust, seen and witnessed terrible events, and he came to this country as a refugee. And then a few years later, after going to school and educating himself and doing remarkably, amazingly, he was involved in the moon landing. He was involved in probably the most remarkable sort of scientific event in human history, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about Michael and his story, and then we're going to talk about a writing project that I'm going to set for you. But first of all, I wanted to tell you a bit about Michael Novice. So as we can see here behind me, this is a picture of Apollo 11 taking off, going to the moon in July 1969. And here we have one of the astronauts on the moon. And also, as you can see there, a footprint on the moon. That's a photograph of a footprint on the moon. And the story that you've got, that you're going to be looking at in school this week, one chapter a day, is called Small Steps. And when the astronauts first landed on the moon, they said, the Neil Armstrong, who was the lead astronaut, he said, "This is one small step for man, a giant leap for mankind." And so I've called this story Small Steps, and it is about the small steps on the moon, but it's also about the steps that Michael Novice, this Holocaust survivor, took to, after surviving the most horrific events in human history. He went on to design the camera which took the photographs of the first men on the moon. And I'm sure, like, you could look up now on YouTube and see Neil Armstrong setting foot on the moon for the first time. A much grainier version image like that. And it was the most remarkable sort of scientific event in human history. And this is a newspaper from the day after. This is the New York Times. Man walks on the moon. And to think that a person who had survived the Holocaust was part of that astonishing mission just really grabbed my attention. When I'm looking for a story all the time, I'm looking for something which jumps out at me and means something to me. For instance, I've written a book about a runner during the First World War whose job it was to run across the battlefield and deliver messages. I've also written about a parachuting dog, true story in the Second World War, a dog that parachuted in and took part in D-Day to help liberate Europe from Nazi occupation. They're the kind of stories that jump out at me, as did the story of Michael Novice, more than any. And I think any story I've written in all the 57 books I've written, this story feels to me to be the most remarkable. But when you're writing about the Holocaust, which you're going to be doing, because I'm going to be setting you some challenges, when you're writing about the Holocaust, you have to get your facts absolutely right. So I took absolute care to do that, and I did that in several ways. I did it by reading this book about Michael Novice. I also, you can go online and there are 4 or 5 sort of hour-long interviews with Michael Novice when he was a little younger. He is still alive, but he's much older now. There was some interviews with him when he was in his 70s, and I listened to what he said. I read about what happened to him in the book, and also had the great honour of speaking to his daughter, so Michael Novice's daughter. I met her online, and we've had several conversations just to make sure that I've got his story right. So when you read Small Steps in its 5 chapters, the story of Michael Novice, you will know that it is based completely on what he remembers from the events of the Second World War, and it's been checked and double checked and triple checked by his family, and not only his family but by Holocaust historians, because when you're writing a story about the Holocaust, you really do, as I've already said, have to get your facts absolutely right, and that's what I've tried to do with this story. I really hope you enjoy it as a story. I've written the 5 chapters, and I've also read the 5 chapters on video, so that you can either read it yourself, have your teacher or parent read it to you, or you can watch my videos of me reading it if you would like to. And like in one of those chapters, I got quite emotional, and I was reading it out, and I was feeling emotional. I had to stop and sort of remember what he went through, and remember what an astonishing achievement it is. He went on from being a Holocaust survivor to being involved in the moon landings, and it made me quite emotional. I had to stop, and I wondered whether I should redo that film, but I decided not to, because I don't want to hide the fact that I feel emotional about people who've been through very, very difficult times and have come through them and gone on to do remarkable things. I don't want to hide the fact that I'm emotional about refugees in the past and refugees today, and these great feats. So I left it in the video, and I made that decision, and I think it's the right thing to do, because there are lots of things in the world to be emotional about, and I personally don't think we should hide from them. Anyway, so that's the story you're going to be listening to. The other thing I just wanted to mention to you relatively briefly was I've also set you a writing challenge, and it's a writing challenge not about Michael Novice, but another Holocaust survivor. This group of children, this is the story of 300 children who survived the Holocaust. They come to live in the UK, and one of them was Michael Novice, who went on to do, as we know, he went on to do what he did. Another of them was Sir Ben Helfgott, and I've got here a book about Sir Ben Helfgott. This is Sir Ben Helfgott. This is a picture of him in his 70s. He was a Holocaust survivor who went through dreadful, dreadful times. And as you can see on the book, there is a picture of him there lifting weights. He survived the Holocaust and then stayed in the UK. He became a British citizen, and he ended up going to the Olympics for Team GB as a weightlifter. He was a champion weightlifter in the UK for 3 or 4 years, and I find that story equally remarkable. But I've not written a story to do with Ben Helfgott, although his story did influence after the war a lot, but I've not written a direct story about him. I'd like to challenge you to do that. What I've done is I've set out 5 stages of how I go about writing, and there are sort of 5 exercises to do. And by the end of that, you, if you're doing it in your class or at home, you'll have a story that you'll have put together based around Ben Helfgott. And the 5 stages, I'll tell you what the 5 stages are, because I think it's really important. For me, writing is not just sitting down and filling a blank piece of paper with words. There's 5 stages to writing, and each of those is equally important. And they are having the idea of what your story is going to be about, so making sure you've got a good idea that means something to you. The second is doing research, finding out what you need to know to make the story as effective as possible, such as reading books, visiting museums, meeting people in real life. I've had the great honour of meeting Sir Ben Helfgott in person. So that's research is the second one. The third one is planning. I think planning is really important. If you plan, it's a great way of making it much easier when you actually start writing the story. The fourth thing is the writing, actually putting the words on the page. And the fifth thing is editing. So once you've written, you then go through it and rewrite it and change it. And I think all of those are equally important as part of the writing process. So in the workshop, in the worksheets, sorry, that I've given you, and videos which go along with that, where I explain and model the process, that sort of leads you through that process of how I go about writing. We all write in different ways, but and I've learned from other writers what they like to do, and I've taken some of what other writers do and not what other writers do as well, and I've worked out my own way of writing, and I hope this will help contribute to you and your writing. But the two things together, the story of Michael Novice, who after being a Holocaust survivor and refugee, went on to being involved in the moon landings themselves, and the story of Ben Helfgott, who is a Holocaust survivor who went on to be a weightlifter in the Olympics. I feel those stories are both very close to each other, and like there's a lot of similarities, but also very close to my heart in that it just astonishes with me what these two people achieved in their lives. Anyway, I'll stop now. So I hope you enjoy the story. I also hope you enjoy the writing process as well. And I'll wish you all and your communities all the best. Thank you for listening.